Now let's actually learn about the freaking country.
I'd like to learn about it too.
It's time to learn geography.
No! It's like Tasmania, known for being crazy.
Tasmania is not known for being crazy. It's a beautiful place to live. I don't know anything about it being crazy though.
Where things get a little interesting, though, are the territories. Technically 7 if you include the Australian Antarctic territory.
I didn't know we had a part of Arctic? Yeah, anyway.
Hey guys, I'm Alicia and I am a professional presenter, actress and model from Australia and are watching the Vids World channel. Today I am very excited to react to Geography Now Australia. So before I start though, be sure to subscribe to our channel by hitting the subscribe button below and follow us on social media.
I'm Australian, so it'll be interesting to see what this guy has to say about where
Get
I'm
it
from.
off of our chests. Koalas and kangaroos, boomerangs, didgeridoos, Sydney, Melbourne, Uluru, crocodiles, cockadoos, everything that will kill you, shrimp on Barbies, that's not true, that Vegemite stuff that tastes like poo, coral reefs and platypuses, platypi, what's the plural of
I think it's just platypus, isn't it? I don't know.
platypus? Alright, now
Okay, that was an interesting song. Maybe it would have been better with a bit of backing track, but I'll give it 5 out of 10 for effort.
let's actually learn about the freaking country.
I'd like to learn about it too.
It's time to learn geography.
Hey everybody, I'm your host Paul Barbato.
Hi, Paul.
Be Australia, you know the drill, let's dissect the flag. The Australian flag has a blue field with a Union Jack on the upper hoist corner.
Yes, I'll explain what it is, and then you can listen to what he says. The Union Jack is because we are colonized or whatever by the UK, so that's the UK part of it, and then the stars are the Southern Cross because something to do with that's in the sky above us or something. I don't know. Let's see if I'm right.
To represent that it was a former colony and a current Commonwealth of the United Kingdom, with a large star under it representing the Commonwealth, and the 5 stars on the right, the Alpha, Beta, Gamma, Delta, Epsilon Crucis, to the right representing the Southern Cross constellation.
See? I knew that.
Alright, that was fun. Now let's discuss about the borders.
Let's.
Now, obviously, as an island nation, or rather large one, but still an island, Australia doesn't have any borders with any other nations. It doesn't mean that Australia doesn't have some rather intriguing parameters.
Really? What are our intriguing parameters? Do go
The
on.
country divides itself up in a rather intriguing way. Like the US, Australia has states.
Oh my God.
Differences. There is a difference. 6 of them, and each one kind of has their own little flair and quirk.
Does it? I guess so. All seems the same to me.
It's like Tasmania, known for being crazy.
Tasmania is not known for being crazy. Tasmania is known for its beautiful countryside, its beautiful wine, amazing produce there. It's a very fertile soil. It's a beautiful place to live. I don't know anything about it being crazy though.
Where things get a little interesting, though, are the territories. Australia has 3 domestic internal territories and 6 overseas territories. Technically 7 if you include the Australian Antarctic territory, even though the Antarctic Treaty kind of bans anybody from claiming Antarctic soil.
I didn't know we had a part of Arctic? Yeah, anyway.
As their own, which we will find out in future episodes that a lot of countries do a wonderful job at ignoring. The 3 internal territories are Northern Territory, Capital Territory, which is basically just the capital city of Canberra and some extra...
Canberra? Canberra? Sorry, it's just Canberra. You gotta get your Aussie on. Canberra. Oh, swore, mate. You better beep that out.
Space around it, and the confusing little tyke Jervis Bay
Canberra.
territory. Jervis Bay was bought and developed to give the inland capital Canberra access to the
Jervis Bay is not a territory. It's just a place people go for holiday.
sea, and eventually Jervis Bay split from the capital. However, it's still counted as part of the capital in elections. It's a little confusing, even though it really doesn't have much going for it, except for a small navy base and beaches that it kind of took from other neighboring towns. The most dramatic border area, though, would have to be the
Jervis Bay is nice. A lot of people go there for holiday. It's like, I don't know, what's it called? North of Sydney. And yeah, it's really beautiful. I've been there a couple of times.
middle of Australia. For years, this slab of land didn't exactly quite know how to distinguish itself and has gone through 4 transitions in the past century. First, it was all South Australia, which didn't quite make sense because parts of it touched the northern parts of Australia, so it split into 2, 1 state and 1 territory. Then for 4 years, it became South Australia and 2 territories, the new one being called Central Australian Territory. Then finally it changed its mind and went back to being Northern Territory.
Wow, that's fascinating.
Central Australia is kind of like your girlfriend at a restaurant. What do you want? What do you want? It's not that simple!
Well, I don't know who you're dating, but I always know what I want to eat at a restaurant.
Finally, we reach the overseas territories. Although Australia has over 8,000 islands under its sovereignty, 6 of these islands operate as distinct territories, some of which sustain themselves with permanent populations. They are Ashmore and Cartier, the Cocos or Keelings Islands, Coral Sea Islands, the Heard and McDonald Islands, and the popular holiday spot, Norfolk Island, and the pleasant Christmas Island that gets attacked by huge coconut crabs every year.
Never heard of them. Well, actually, I have heard of Christmas Island because I think they have detention centres on that island actually, which is a big controversy in Australia with the refugees and the boat people. But that's a story for another day.
Finally, Australia is home to arguably the most micronations in the world. Places like the Principality of Wye, Rainbow Creek, the Empire of Atlantium, and more. These nations were developed by either small groups of people or a single person because they were doing things like protesting taxes and wanted to claim autonomy, or they were just kind of bored and decided to amuse themselves. But still, hey, they tried. All right.
I never knew that. That's news to me.
Now let's talk about the landscape.
Let's talk about it. Let's talk about the landscape. Let's do it.
Okay, not all of Australia is a desert, okay? Only about 35%. Okay, so besides Antarctica,
Wait, people think all of Australia is a desert? Well,
Australia is the driest continent on the planet, which explains why, yes, 85%
Is
of
it?
the population
What about
lives
Africa?
along the edges of the country within 50 kilometers of the coast. Nonetheless, a lot of places, specifically around the coasts, actually have very temperate and even tropical landscapes. By the north, you find tropical zones and wetlands and rainforests. By the far edges on the east and
yeah, it's really pretty up in Cairns, which is like the farthest most northern point. There's the beautiful Daintree rainforest. If you ever come to Australia, definitely go and see that because it's beautiful.
west, you can find subtropical zones with lighter forests and plains. A little bit inland, close to the interior, you find grasslands and flat stretches of semi-arid terrain. In the southeast by sea.
I've never been. Can you see my mouse? Yeah, you can. So I live over this area here. And I've been up to here, up to Cairns, and I actually haven't been to Tasmania. I've been to Queensland, which is here. I've been to Melbourne. I've been to Adelaide, but I've never been to this half of the country, which is crazy. Like one day, I definitely want to I don't know, get like a van and go travel around Australia, but haven't got around to it yet.
Sydney, you find temperate, cooler, arid land with semi-tropical, yet slightly dry areas with an abundance of trees and plants. Then, of course, you have Tasmania, which is on a completely different level of green. Then we reach the deep interior where we hit the great deserts like the Great Victoria and the Great Sandy Deserts. This area is famously known as the Outback. The Outback is essentially the area of Australia with long open stretches of red and orange desert that lays out beyond the horizon with few sparse populations of people that can be found anywhere. It has a dry, rocky, rugged terrain that everybody assumes is teeming with a variety of poisonous insects and reptiles, and, well, I mean, it kind of is, but still, there's more to it than just that. Oh, and don't forget Lake Hillier, that strange lake that is mysteriously naturally pink for some strange reason that baffles scientists. Now,
It's
if there's
pretty.
one thing that really epitomizes Australia, it would
I love pink. Pink's my favorite color.
have to be its world-renowned beaches and coasts. People
Yeah,
flock from all over the
man.
world just to enjoy the beautiful, pristine atmosphere.
I actually hate going to the beach. I've grown up in Australia and I'm not a beach person. I just don't. I find it so boring just lying in the sun on the beach, getting sunburnt, getting sand all in your swimmers, getting dumped by the waves. It's not for me.
Of a real, authentic Australian beach. Just remember to put on your sunscreen, though. Australians actually kind of have a
Yes.
joke where they can tell who the ignorant tourists are. It's usually the
That's
ones who
true.
think they'll be totally fine sitting out in the sun for more than 20 minutes.
So usually all the British tourists, they end up being so red.
Skin cancer rates are actually exceptionally high in Australia, and the population has acknowledged the
True. My dad actually. So my dad's English, and he moved to Australia when he was 18. Anyway, he's 67 now, and he's had so many potential skin cancers burnt off him. And actually, just recently, he had one removed that they weren't sure if it was a cancer or not, and turns out it was. But thank God they got it out of him before it could spread anywhere in him. But that's one of the reasons why I just don't enjoy going to the beach, because the sun is really strong here. I've been to Europe and it's just different. It feels different on you. And it gives you a different color. Like I can actually tan if I go to Europe, but in Australia I just burn. So I put sun cream on every single day on my face, on my hands, on my chest, because it ages you. Like the number one tip, I mean, for anywhere you live, but number one tip for in Australia if you want to keep, good skin and looking youthful, sun cream.
Precautions that they need to take. Now, we all know that Australia is home to some of the most unique and curiously distinct animal species in the world, not found anywhere else.
Yeah.
However, Australia is also known as the home of many feral species. Australia has over 50 invasive species that were brought over to the land from areas mostly in Europe,
What
and
are
over
they?
the course of nearly 1.5 centuries have bred and spread like wildfire all over the country. Animals like the European rabbit, red fox, water buffaloes, goats, pigs,
I didn't know we had buffaloes.
even camels, and worst of all, the famous cane toad. They've all
The cane toads are funny. They're not so much. They're more like if you go to like Queensland or something like that, or like when we went up to Cairns. There's heaps of toads up there.
gone wild and have cost the Australian government billions of dollars in environmental damages and maintenance. Yeah, I don't really know how to transition into the demographics from this part, so here's demographics.
Wow, what a great transition! You nailed it.
Today, Australia has a population of about 23 million people. Now, to many outsiders, Australia is kind of known as the place where the British sent their prisoners. First of all, that's rude. Second of all, that's only like kind
It's
of
not rude. It's true. That is where they sent them. That's
half true. Yes, during the early years of Australia's colonization from the UK, droves of convicts were sent to penal colonies in Botany Bay, which is now in present-day Sydney. Over 165,000 convicts, about 25,000 of which were women.
I used to live near Botany Bay actually, and obviously now it's I think it's just a big shipping port now, but it's kind of crazy when you think about it. Like that was where they first arrived, but yeah, now it's just all industrial and.
Women were sent over the course of 80 years. Although the British...
Actually, I was watching something recently about female convicts because I'm an actor and I'm about to play a role where I actually play an Irish convict shipped over from Europe to Australia. Anyway, and I was reading a lot of the history about like what happened to the women on board those ships coming over to Australia, and it's pretty brutal, like just a lot of abuse, sexual abuse, and being forced to get married, and it would have been a rough journey for those women.
weren't the first ones to discover Australia. It was actually the Dutch. As they came, they named the land New Holland and the adjacent island next door New Zealand after the province of Zeeland in the Netherlands. However, as we'll soon discover, the Dutch were really good at discovering places, but kind of not so good at colonizing and maintaining those places for themselves. However, most of Australia's population came from natural colonization from British non-convict nationals. Some would argue that Australia was kind of like the UK's version of Operation Backup Plan in case of America goes crazy. After the American Revolution, the UK tried to compensate for lost colonies by re-establishing new ones, and Australia was hot on the list. About 85% of the population is European. Asians...
I think it's important to note you've skipped over here, obviously, the original owners or living people of the land were the Aboriginal people. So I think it's important to note that I noticed that you haven't said that. So that's very important to pay respects to the Aboriginal people, the original owners of the land, and past, present, and future leaders.
Make up the next largest minority of about 12%, mostly coming from China and India and other Southeast Asian countries like Vietnam and the Philippines. And by the way, yes, Australia does have black people, not many, but before the Federation began, Africans, mostly from sub-Saharan countries like South Africa, Mauritius, Zimbabwe, and Sudan, have historically resided in Australia. It wasn't until the 60s when African assistance programs allowed many Africans to study and eventually move to Australia.
There's
Today,
all sorts
they make
of
up
people
about
here.
1% of the population. One demographic of people that commonly gets overlooked, though, would have to be the native Australians, commonly known
Okay,
as
I'm glad you're mentioning it.
the Aborigines, which make up about 3% of the population. Aborigines are a very unique and distinct people group that come from hundreds of different tribes, each with their own language and dialect, spread throughout the north, south, and central regions. Today, Aboriginal rights are a huge hot-button topic in Australian legislation, and about 22% of the land of northern Australia is Aboriginal-owned. In 2013, Aboriginal groups actually banded together and decided to kind of make their own little state called the Murawari Republic, independent from Australia. The Australian government, though, doesn't really recognize this claim and just kind of brushes it off with a meh, as long as you don't cause a civil war attitude. Well, as you can see, a lot of people have come to live in Australia, but now let's see how Australia interacts with the rest of the world.
I think it's interesting that you say that you make a point about saying oh yes, there's black people in Australia, but there's all sorts of people in Australia, as there is over the whole world. So, you know, there's Asian people, there's Middle Eastern people, there's, you know, Russian people, there's, you know, Australia is such a melting pot of so many different cultures, and I think that's what makes it really beautiful and really special. So, I think that's one of the most amazing things about our country is like everyone's here. Do you know what I mean?
Australia is, let's just put it very simply, a very popular country. If this was high school, Australia would be on the top of the social ladder.
Gosh, thank you.
Everybody knows something about Australia. When it comes to friends, though, Australia not only goes for the cool kids, but also the strategic ones. Of course, Australia gets along with many of its Asian neighbor nations, specifically China and India, as large numbers of people from those nations live in Australia, and they do great business with them as well. Australia gets along pretty well with the islands of Oceania, except Fiji. In 2006,
We don't get along with
Australia refused
Fiji?
to back up a military coup that overthrew the government in Fiji.
Goodness
and
gracious.
Since then, things have been a little weird between the two countries. In terms
I didn't know that.
of their best friends, though, of course, New Zealand would have to rank in the top level, and they are basically like siblings that share a very similar culture, language, and histories as former colonies, whereas the UK also has a high priority on Australia's entourage as they make up the largest demographic of people ethnically and as migrants in the country. But
Yeah, like my dad, for example.
finally, we reach the USA. The USA and Australia kind of have a little crush on each other. Australia is
Aw.
always there to back up the US in times when allies are necessary, and the US, well, I mean, we Americans, we just love Australians. We love their accents, we love their culture, we love their accents, we love their spunky Australian attitude, and we love their sexy, sexy accents. Almost any
You're welcome.
Australian that comes to the US is immediately loved and welcome, even if they are slightly sociopathic. One sentence with that accent and we are smitten. We love you, Australia.
We
In
love you
conclusion,
too.
Australia is just, everybody loves Australia. Stay tuned.
Except for
Austria
Fiji.
is coming up next.
Good job! Good job! Well, that was really fun. I learnt some things. I corrected some things. It was a journey. I guess I hope you guys enjoyed watching today's reaction video, and please give it a thumbs up, share the video, and let us know in the comments what you would like us to react to next. You can support us by hitting the super thanks button below if you want. So take care. See you later.